We had a great film that we watched this week. Dr. McGraw, thanks for recommending the Remember the Titans movie. But the main thing is we're here to have a conversation and discussion, and that's what Dr. McGraw is here for. So if you have comments or questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can go ahead and jump right in there and let's talk about what's on your mind. So, Dr. McGraw, thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Echoing Bill's point, I really would like very much for you guys to jump in. My title is From Me to We. I think that we are suffering very much from atomization in our society. We're isolated from one another. The COVID crisis has made this even more acute for all of us. And I've worked very hard in about 20 years' time over the years to select films that really help us to go from me to we. So, one of the thoughts I want to throw out to you to reflect on later is just what are the specific ways that this tremendous film helps us all to go from me to we. I wanted you to see the wonderful men who were the role models. They both have recently passed away. Coach Yost is here and the real Coach Boone. And with our stars, Will Patton and the great Denzel Washington.
So they both coaches lived to see this film made then.
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yes. And the next slide, you'll see the dates involved. Then I wanted to emphasize the moral authority. That's what the screen hides that. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I talked about Coach Boone's moral authority at Gettysburg. If we don't come together right now on this hallowed ground, then we too will be destroyed. So the screenwriter is very important to the film, extremely important. He was somebody who was a Virginia native. He was in Los Angeles and he decided to go back to visit his town. He's in Alexandria. And they're talking about this years later. They're talking about this football team, the Titans football team at T.C. Williams High School. This isn't very far at all from where I live. Front Royal is about an hour and a half from Alexandria. And so the people in the town were saying it changed our whole way of looking at each other. It changed our whole town. And this talented screenwriter knew he had a story to tell. Here they are, Coach Herman Boone and Coach Yost. And this was what was caught in the news article from Britain. We found a way to talk to one another. And I think it's kind of exciting when you think how this was all written up in Great Britain. And it shows how American culture, through American films, really have always had such an international impact. These two men are of great interest to the people of England all these many years later. I wanted to give you some of the scholarly foundations for the whole idea of from me to we. This is one of the most valuable textbooks. It's really a graduate level textbook on positive psychology. And these wonderful people, Christopher Peterson and Martin Seligman, compiled from hundreds and hundreds of experts, academics in the field of psychology, sociology. What are the enduring character strengths and virtues that human beings have? And the character trait of transcendence is one of the ones they identify. the ability of human beings to always look beyond just material reality. And that to me is one of the most wonderful things about this movie and about classic movies, is that we can see in these kinds of movies that it isn't just about somebody surviving in a bad situation or something like that. It's not just an adventure story. It's about characters that actually experience transcendence with one another. And this is the quote I chose because these members of this Titans football team, black and white, really come to see through the whole course of the movie, don't they, that they're a part of something much bigger than just themselves as individuals. Okay. Bill has mentioned before how I was active in the early part of the civil rights movement. In the early 60s myself, I was privileged to be an exchange student at Howard University and heard firsthand Martin Luther King urge us to stand up for civil rights. And I wanted to share with you this music by Peter, Paul, and Mary, because this song by Bob Dylan, Blowing in the Wind, literally was a clarion call for the entire nation to sing out and feel the universal sense that we are all human beings and share together. So if we have time and if we can catch it, I hope we can. So I wanted to call your attention here to the music in the locker room scene and revisit that in your memory of how Louis, this wonderful character, Louis, right, who will burst into song and carry with him that spirit and what a key role he played by just being able to sing and singing it out. Okay. This is another scholarly piece of work just to call your attention to. The book is called The Upswing: How America Came Together a Century Ago and How We Can Do It Again. And this is a very important book, brand new book, come out in October 2020. And Robert Putnam documents with incredible social science research that the period of time from sort of the mid-1930s going on through the 40s and the 50s and into the early 60s was a time of great social capital sharing. And that was the point I was going to share with you with Peter, Paul, and Mary and the singing of Blowing in the Wind. And when Alexandria was going through the throes of integration, that was 1971, I believe is the year that this is happening. And that was still well within the time that there was a lot of social capital in the United States still to work together for the good. Okay. This is one of my questions I have for you to reflect and discuss, is to go in a little bit further into what exactly Coach Yost does do to bring that social capital to the Titans team. Does anyone want to break in right now and make a comment on exactly, if you remember those scenes of Coach Yost? He has some pretty serious moral decisions to make, doesn't he? Does anyone want to give a comment on exactly what he does?
Yeah, he gave up what was promised to him in a head coaching position by calling out the refs on them kind of throwing the game. So in essence, he kind of gave up his future for the greater good of the team the fact that they were coming together and he really bought into them as a team at that point. I felt he bought into the whole thing at that point by giving that up.
Absolutely. It was a sacrifice, and it shows that nothing comes cheaply when you really are going to have to build that social capital, build up, overcome the worst sides of human nature for the better side. It isn't just singing Kumbaya and all of a sudden everything is great. People almost always have to make these kinds of really serious sacrificial decisions. Does anyone else have a comment on that before we go?
Yeah, I wanted to see if anyone remembers the big award that he gave up and how he gave that up.
He was going to be in the Hall of Fame for the TC Williams, like town or city, and it was between him and other people, and they said if you just let it happen, let the game go, let your team lose, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. But he didn't want that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what I was.
Yep. Good. Okay, let's go on. Here's another point that we can remember. The whole concept of fraternal correction, that's gone out of style in our culture today, and it's so needed. Peers have to help peers to get things right, especially when there's such a loss of authority in our culture today. And so does anyone want to comment a bit about this? These men are very, very good friends. You see that in the beginning of the film. And then you think about the big thing of justice, true justice, and how true justice and truth go so well together.
He kind of stays after the game, waits for everyone to get out of the locker room, and he sees Ray, and he steps him off to the side. So it's just him and Ray, and tells him, hey, I know what you did. You let the quarterback get injured or get hit. Just let the defensive lineman get by you. And now he's injured for a big chunk of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And you're off the team. And even though that the coach's demand or rules say that he's not going to cut anyone, it wasn't the coach's decision, it was Gary's. And he'd rather have a team that trusts everyone than his friend being on the team and doing that on the field.
Beautiful, beautiful summary.
Why do you think this has gone out of style? What's changed about our culture to this is not the thing to do anymore? Anybody have any thoughts on that one?
I feel some people are too afraid to step up against some people, especially like really good friends or something. And I think people are more afraid of losing their friendship than what they have to say. At least that's me saying it in my opinion.
It's a good point.
I would agree. Most people would see it as, kind of a betrayal of friendship, but in this case, it's for the greater good.
Exactly. And yes.
Well, I just, as a teacher, I've noticed in the decade and a half, well, it's getting close to 2 decades now that I've been teaching. It's changed even between teachers and students. I mean, as far as making corrections or even trying to coach, trying to help people improve, and people don't want to hear criticism. You get your head bit off sometimes when you're just trying to help.
So this is another piece of the scholarly support for the type of program that emphasizes character and the film characters. The Righteous Mind, which I recommend to anyone who wants to answer the question, which is what he has as his subtitle, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. Classic movies, Plato's Cave, and the recovery of moral and social capital in our society. So I like to present to you this image of Plato's Cave, which is very famous. It was in the ancient Greek Plato's Republic. And this is an illustration of it, the idea that the shadows on the wall are what these people who are prisoners in the cave are seeing. And that is the truth that they see. Plato describes it that way. He says the prisoners see the shadows on the wall and they see that as truth. And then the image shows you gradually some people escape, and then they can even bring each other out of the cave and into the sunlight. And one of the things that I think is a long-time classic movie person, you know, working in this field, and I've seen it over and over again, is that when you see a great, beautiful classic movie like Remember the Titans, you're all seeing the same thing. You're seeing the same realities, even though there will be some differences based on our own personality, some subjectivity, our own experience. But basically, we're able to sit and talk about what's real and true because we're all seeing the same thing. This carries through in the pillars that Jonathan Haidt developed, which I found to be so present in Remember the Titans. The pillars that he identifies these are the pillars that people have to share and kind of build up in society in order for there to be order and justice versus chaos and injustice. So these pillars that Jonathan Haidt identifies are authority, loyalty, and sanctity. And then the others are care versus harm, fairness versus cheating, and liberty. So I wanted to give you some examples from the film that show this. On the moral foundation of authority, does anyone want to talk or reflect about this really incredibly entertaining but very telling early scene where Coach Boone, just imagine what he's up against. And Jonathan Haidt talks about this in the quote that you can see there, that if authority is in part about protecting order and fending off chaos, then everyone has a stake in supporting the existing order and in holding people accountable for fulfilling the obligations of their station. This is right out of this brilliant moral psychologist, Jonathan Haidt, who is celebrated in our country, left, right, and center. No one thinks he has a political or religious axe to grind. So what do you guys all think about this? What Coach Boone actually does with Gary in that very early scene that somehow establishes his authority as coach. Does anyone want to talk about that very interesting exchange that happens? And of course, the parents are all right there.
Well, he calls him out right in front of everybody, more like, you know, kind of humiliating him in a sense.
Yes.
So what, you know, what the idea is and what you're saying to me is, it's a joke. You know, I'm the boss and this is how it's going to be.
The moral foundation of loyalty. And again, this is this is something we are losing in our culture and in our society, in our communities. The whole idea of sustained loyalty over time, something we all have to work on with each other and in building up our institutions. But I thought this was really interesting. Does anyone want to comment on this whole situation with Emma? I thought it was well portrayed. Emma is the girlfriend, if you remember, of Gary.
Well, it started with Gary and Julius not getting along at the beginning of the movie, and then after the camp, they become best friends and really good friends. And he introduces his good friend now to his girlfriend, and his girlfriend didn't shake his hand. And it kind of progresses through the movie and how she overcomes it towards the end, right before the state championship. And then during the state championship game, she gives Julius a handshake saying,
Yes,
"Hey, I'm okay with you.
that's
I
right.
trust you."
I
Yeah,
think it's kind of crazy how much it changes just from them getting onto the bus, kind of more in the beginning of the movie, in the middle of the movie, them getting off the bus.
So there's probably some science or some theory to kind of explain that as well, because they went through a boot camp of sorts.
let's go to the next one then. The third moral pillar that's vital for civil society is sanctity. That is holding certain things really sacred in your world, things that are honored and protected and sustained over time. And this is where Coach Boone takes them right there to Gettysburg and talks to them and sets the tone for the whole film, because he says, I don't care if you like each other or not, but you will respect each other. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll learn to play this game like men. So of course he's calling them to be human beings with each other, striving to overcome the racial divisions. The next moral foundation is liberty, and maybe someone has some comments on that. You have to make a moral decision. You can't rely on a kind of business as usual.
I thought it was a great scene when Alan realized that Petey was a better player than him, that Alan couldn't cover the other guys, and he knew for the betterment of the team to put apart the social, and I think they were a little bit past some of the social issues at that with race after going through boot camp, but it really expressed his willingness for the betterment of the team to sacrifice his own glory in a way, if you will, to allow somebody else to step in there and that he knew could do a better job than him.
Yeah, just really great. Okay, so the authenticity that I wanted to speak about is what I find in all these great films. Remember the Titans, of course, being not exactly strictly in the classic film period, but all of them have this quality of capturing authenticity of human nature. And that is what struck me, was that this screenwriter goes back to Virginia, he goes to the town, and he finds that this true story of these actual events that took place, which of course gives the huge authenticity to this film, is that this really did happen. Solidarity, this is of course so beautiful to me with the friendship between Coach Yost and Coach Boone, which was all true, everything, the basic patterns there. And so one of the reasons why I think it's good to study classic film and discuss it is that you can really address what is the better side of human nature and what is the worst side of human nature, which is really one of the most important things that people really did take for granted when I was growing up and coming of age. And it's just not true today. We just don't have a basic moral understanding, or we do. Maybe it's deep in our hearts. And when we see a film like this, we can all agree that it's there. So I think it's important to study these films so that we can show that there can be basic agreement about what's good and what's bad in human nature. So what are some vital lessons for today that we can learn from Remember the Titans, and think what maybe we all have the ability to do or could do ourselves? What kind of lesson right in our own communities might we be able to put to work that we saw in this great film?
So in the chat, Heather has written that you should treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yep, very basic, golden rule.
Something that I picked up, it really doesn't necessarily even relate to racism so much, is working together, to achieve a goal, to get what you're after.
We've got some more entries into the chat, Dr. Jenner. We've got nothing stronger than a brotherhood. Stick together and stand up for what you believe in. Don't judge a book by its cover. Sometimes you have to cut out the toxicity in an organization.
Yes.
And get to know people who aren't like you so that you see that you are more alike than different.
The book study guide I worked on, I titled it Shining Light on Our Common Humanity. And I was very fortunate to have a friend, Tim Langendorfer, an artist, who created this beautiful image of Denzel and Bill Patton in a poster that we had. And when he did this for us, as well as some of our others. And the poster on Remember the Titans was the very first one he did. Other comments about everything?
I'd like to hear, I had some definite favorite characters that popped up in the film. What were some of your favorite characters for the group? I mean, there's the obvious ones, the main characters, but
Louis was my favorite.
Pardon me?
Louis was my favorite. The way he came in when they were all meeting in the gym, and it was just, the black guys and the white guys hadn't showed up yet, and he just slides in there, and everybody looks at him like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Somebody said football, and I came running," and he didn't see anybody any different. I mean, he was so far, as much as he bagged on himself, being self-aware, he was so far ahead of everybody else, probably because of some life experiences, his dad being in the Navy. He saw things more for how they really were, at that point, and related to them.
That was the piece.
That's who I was going to say.
That part about the being a naval family, I didn't ever pick up on that in multiple viewings of this film, and I noticed it this time, and
neither did I.
As soon as I heard it, I thought, of course that's why he's that way. He's been around this, and the military went through that decades before, trying to sort that out.
Well, it's kind of like Sunshine's dad when he brought him to camp, and he said he was going to play at such and such. I can't remember the name, but his coach wouldn't let your black kids play on the team. And I thought, if we can fight together, because he was another military guy, if we can fight together, why can't we play together? Again, another example of being farther advanced than the other non-integrated folk.
And I love at the end when he gets into college, or when he's able to have the grades to get into college, because with all of his self-awareness or his ability to fit into a crowd, he had no confidence that he would go to college.
Yes.
So
Wow.
I've asked students to look for connections because they had to watch at least 2 of the films, and what were some of the connections. I'll give you a hint as one that I found. You pointed it out. He said he was white trash. What other film in the 3 did we watch this past 3 weeks where someone referred to them the same thing, said I'm white trash, but they didn't have that greater view of themselves. They didn't come around or evolve. Do anybody know what film I'm talking about? There's
No
only
Way
2.
Out.
No Way Out.
Yeah.
That was evil.
And they had the whole town was white trash, and they were never going to get any better either. They had their minds made up. But we saw in that one that, well, what was the woman's name? Only you have to help me, I forget.
Oh my gosh, Edie Johnson.
That's right.
Did I get it right?
Yes. She's the one that evolved and came along, and yeah. So, but yeah, those are 2 things that you could draw a comparison between those 2 films. But there's other definite similarities like that.
That's beautiful. And also getting to know people. In No Way Out, you have Edie and Gladys sitting down, and they really get to know each other in a very short time. And then someone was commenting here tonight that Coach Boone said, you're going to have to get to know each other, right? In boot camp. And they had to do that. And that seems to be something we really can think about.
There was that one scene when I don't even remember the characters now, but he sat at the wrong table, not because of his color, because he was offense and this is the defensive table or something.
That was
like
Louis again, wasn't it? Or
No, that was Ray. He was trying to sit
Ray.
with
Okay.
Gary, and
Buddy. Yeah,
he was sitting at the defense table, and he was on offense.
I thought that was great.
It's kind of a hidden little precursor to how Gary ended up having to get rid of Ray.
it is interesting. Yeah.
Foreshadowing. Now we're getting into some literary. Yeah. Nice.
I really like the shower scene where they're doing Yo Mama jokes and stuff. And I really thought they came together and bonded during that time.
That was good. That was also a real risk. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming, dropping by tonight to have this conversation, to have this discussion. Thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate the turnout tonight and support for this project.